Hello, everybody. I have good news for you. No artificial intelligence in this room. We have no Slidos. So you can ask at the end your questions directly to a real person. She will give you a microphone. Or I will come and give you a microphone. So, it's really impressive to be here. It's my second time as a chair. But it's small room, so it's easier. So, and that's the subject. Where we will talk of business at human scale, managing like you have skin in the game. Well, to talk of that, we have a very high diversity this morning. I will introduce you our speaker. Christiane Wenckheim. She's a chairwoman of a very great company. If you arrived yesterday and you went in a bar, you discovered Ottakringer beer. I personally tasted it. She's the chairwoman of Ottakringer.
Thank you.
Well, I'm not allowed to make advertisement, but she's really the chairwoman of Ottakringer. Denise Kenyon-Rouvinez, and she's always speaking a very good French, just to mention. I am French, sorry. I will introduce myself in the end. Denise Kenyon-Rouvinez, she's a great professor. She's coming from Lausanne, and she's the director of the Wild Group, professor and director of the IMD Global Family Business Center. She's from Switzerland. She's also speaking a very good French. It's for those who want to ask questions in French at the end of the show. About diversity, Peter Crow just jumped in on Monday in this session. He arrived from New Zealand, so he's a Kiwi. You can acclaim and thank you, Peter, for coming from New Zealand. And Peter is company director and board director. He will tell you more. And finally, from Norway, Bjarte Bogsnes, without mistakes. Bjarte is chairman of a roundtable called Beyond Budgeting Roundtable, and at the same time, he's a senior advisor for performance framework at Equinor. That's all. So, I am Gabriel, Joseph-Dezaize. I am the editor-in-chief of Harvard Business Review in France. There are 13 editions all around the world, and there is a French edition. So if you read French, you can buy it or find it at the ground level. Thank you. So we're going to begin with you, Denise. Denise, please, you can go to the desk. In 2 words, Denise will focus on 3 case studies and reveal the secrets of in long-lasting family firms.
Yes, very good morning, everybody. I would like to start really by saying a little bit how I came to study this. Not only, I share something as well with Christiane, is that we're both 3rd generation in our family businesses, and she's more in the beer business and I'm more in the wine business, but a tradition of long-lasting families as well. First of all, what you see here is beautiful nature. No. And hopefully something that we will preserve for generations. See, I started this research 20 years ago, and I was really intrigued to see or to try to understand why some businesses can last for generations and generations when so many around them in the same business, same industry, same competitive environment last for only 20, 30 or 40 years and then disappear. So I became really curious about that, and I thought I was going to investigate what they do, and I came across quite a number of very, very long-lasting family businesses. The oldest one I have interviewed is 53 generations old. A lot of Japanese, if we have Japanese people in the room, Japan has an amazing number of hugely old family businesses, quite incredible. But the first one I want to talk about is this one, is Frescobaldi. Frescobaldi, have you heard the name or drunk the wines? It's a winemaking company from Italy. They are 700 years old. And what is quite interesting with Frescobaldi is that until the 28th generation, what happened to them was that the business was handed over from one person to one person, and usually from the firstborn son of one generation to the firstborn son of the next generation, with the title of Marchese, along with the plantations, the vineyards, and the whole estate behind. And they took great care of that. But the family has also a lot of other characteristics, is that they really try to foster talent. They try to foster people who have high ambition, high level of integrity as well. So in the family, you will see a lot of poets. You will see prime ministers. You would see bishops. And high-ranking generals as well. So family members really raised to be important, influent, and bring quite a lot of things to the country. The history of the family is completely intertwined with the history of Italy behind. And so what happened? Why did I say 28th generation and stop there? Because at the 29th generation, something different happened. At the 29th generation, Dino Frescobaldi, who was the one who was to inherit the business, said to his father, "No, thank you, not me. I would never be a good person for the wine business, but my 4 siblings are absolutely passionate about that. So why don't you give the business for them to manage? My love and my passion is to be a reporter. I want to go around the world, and I want to bring back to my fellow citizens stories about the world, what's happening, and I want to report back. So why don't you make sure that the 5 of us are shareholders, because we have that love for the heritage that we have that love for that legacy, for the land that we own, but my 4 siblings are going to be the best managers you can find." And that's what they did, and now it took them 30 generations, which is where they are now, to go to the cousin stage. And if I say that, is that what we hear in that is how much excellence is important, how much passion is important, how much drive is important, how much talent and competence is important. And it is one thing that I've learned in long-lasting firms is that they are absolutely ruthless, I would say, at picking talent and competence generation after generation. I know that all of you in the audience have a lot of histories and stories about family businesses that are absolutely atrocious, that are horrible, and that are not functioning. We have a lot of them. But the ones I'm talking about are the ones that have the talent and the potential to last many generations. And in comparing all these families that I have interviewed, all these long-lasting businesses, I ended up identifying 25 success factors that they all share. Not 1, not 2, not 3, but 25 of them, which shows the complexity and the difficulty to make that happen generations after generations. So that is, in essence, the model that I have. If you look at the yellow section, this is all the similarities these families have in their businesses. They have an incredible strong visions. Over yesterday and the day before, we talked about how do you renew entrepreneurial spirit? How do you make sure that you're sufficiently entrepreneurial in your company? And for me, it is more than that. It is what these families have is the vision, the passion, and the drive that they have behind. That is also important, if not far more important. The other thing that they have is they incredibly cherish their employees, and they take care of their employees. They create an environment in which their employees can feel that there is an environment for them to grow. And it is not rare in those families to see multi-generations of the same family employees in them. To give you an example, I'll give you an example of Miele, the German company, the German electrical and household appliances company. Miele is fourth generation, and they have fourth generation employees. They have fourth generation suppliers. They have fourth generation distributors. Really quite interesting to see how that ecosystem works together. And of course, if you don't take care of your employees, you don't take care of your distributors, you don't take care of your producers, you're not going to be able to last over generations. The other thing that they do is that they have an incredibly strong sense of ethics, and they never compromise ethics for the sake of profits. As a matter of fact, profits for the sake of profits is never a pursuit for them. They are, of course, you cannot go over generations without building a profitable business and without growing your business, but profit is not even in their top 5 priorities. And it is interesting to see that when companies don't seek profit first, how much they can reach performance at a far better level as well. To stay at Miele, for instance, Miele is a 2 billion euros company, and it has a principle which is zero debt. They always said, we want to grow and we want to be independent. Our freedom of choice in our strategy is far more important to us than anything else. So we will grow, but we will grow at our pace so that we don't have to make compromises on our principles and our values. Another big trait that they have in that business section is the adaptability. We talk a lot about agility, we talk a lot about entrepreneurial things, we talk a lot about those changes in the questions that we pose in this forum over these few days. But these families have actually always been there. They've always been agile. They've always been adaptable. And you probably can see that it is soya and soya sauce, soya beans and soya sauces. And I want to talk about the Takanashi family in Japan, also because I want to show that these companies, these families, these long-lasting firms exist all over the world. And so the Takanashi family has something that is really interesting. 18 generations ago, in their village, the family started writing the principles of behavior they were expecting from family members. So it's a code of conduct that they wrote down. And today, after at the 19th generation of that family, they still observe those principles. So ethics really at the center of what they do. But interestingly, 13th generations ago, they became farmers and growing soya beans, and then deciding to do soya sauce. And 4 generations ago, they form a union with 7 other families from Japan to create Kikkoman. And with Kikkoman, it was the first time they really went into industrialization. How are we going to mass produce what we have, and how are we going to mass deliver all around the world our products? So they're fantastic at production and logistics. Marujin is it's the corporation of one of these families, the Takanashi family. And for them, their evolution after that was to say, what are we good at and how can we diversify? So from industrialization and logistics, they decided to go into bottling. They became the Coca-Cola bottler in Japan. And from that, they decided to open restaurants so that they could sell their sauces and their drinks to their customers. Having the restaurants, they added hotels because the floors above the restaurants had rooms where they could be, and from the hotels they went into real estate. So really quite an adaptation, but always building on the skills that they had built from the previous businesses that they were in. And that is something that you see in a lot of family businesses. They move into new segments, they move into new sectors, they are quite adaptable and quite flexible, but they only move when they know and they've acquired the knowledge to go there.
Denise, please,
yeah.
we're out of time.
Okay.
I would like a question. Maybe we will ask some questions later on.
No.
You have 2 case studies, so I just want you to add a word about, you were talking of ethics. It's very important. I wanted to ask you a question about the vision. Can you talk of one case study or just in one word, a company that has a vision? Because it's one of the very beginning principles.
Yeah, and but I can talk about one that is called Malerio di Mela, and you may have heard of them or not. They're jewelers, okay, but not just any kind of jewelers, and they're now at the 14th generation. They have been the jewelers of the Medici family in Italy, and then of Marie Antoinette in France, and they have since then been the jewelers of all the royalties around the world. And this means a very, very special craft and a very, very special talent. You don't stay at the top of your trade for 14 generations being the best in the world for 14 generations and breeding the best there. So their vision has always been to be there. We want to be jewelers to the royalties of the world, meaning selecting the most precious gems and the most precious metals, but also having the best creativity that we can have in our family. So incredibly strong vision, still alive 14 generations after. If you give me just 1 minute. Yeah. We just talked about the business. Later on, we can talk about what they do at the family side, at the ownership side, and on the governance side, and how they do that. But I also want to finish with this, because we've been talking about what we needed to invent. When we see, we don't need to reinvent capitalism. We see the models of these families. They have done it. We know we have a model that we can follow. But we can also go back to basics with Aristoteles. Aristoteles defined intelligence in 3 dimensions for the human beings. First, episteme, which is the intellectual. Second, techne, which is the craft. And those 2 things we've done so well in businesses for the past 60 years, since the end of World War II. That's what we have focused on. And business schools, the same. We have focused only on those 2 things. The third one that Aristoteles said was pronesis, which is the practical wisdom and the ethical values. And this we have forgotten. And it is really high time we bring back that third dimension that was given to us 2,000 years ago and that we need to continue and implement in our businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you. Thank you. So, thank you very much. Bjarte, it's your turn. Bjarte, Bogsnes, after these examples, you are going to explain us a theory. So,
thank you. I would like to start with my favorite Peter Drucker quote. Most of what we call management is about making it difficult for people to do their job. I couldn't agree more. At the same time, every day, hundreds of millions of people are exposed to a management model where there's a lot of autonomy, there's a lot of trust, there's a lot of empowerment, and a lot of collaboration. It is a management model where competence is important because it's not easy. It is a management model where values is important. We have to help each other. And it is a management model where transparency is important to make the right decisions. But I'm not talking about these people as employees in organizations, unfortunately. I'm talking about these people as drivers in traffic. Because when we are out driving in traffic, we would also like to experience good performance, a safe and good flow. And the roundabout is a much better way of achieving that compared to the traffic light. The roundabout is not about managing performance. The roundabout is about creating conditions for great performance to take place. It's about enabling performance, not managing performance. Very important distinction. The roundabout is a more self-regulating way of managing. And self-regulation is another important word here when we now are leaving traffic, moving into business. And in today's business and people realities, organizations need more self-regulating management models for at least two reasons. The first reason has to do with our business environment, which has a lot more of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, the VUCA, you know, compared to when I started my management career back in the early 80s as head of the corporate budget department, by the way. Much less VUCA at that time compared to what we see today. And if we take this VUCA seriously, it must have implications for how we design our management models compared to if there was little or no volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity out there. So it is a reality we need to observe. What we see must have consequences. The other reality we need to observe and reflect on is not external, it's internal. It has to do with people. It has to do with asking ourselves a simple but important question. What kind of people do we generally believe we have in our organizations? And good old Douglas McGregor created the language for that important question. Theory X and theory Y, these two opposing views on people and what motivates people. Theory X, the very negative view on people. Theory Y, the much more positive view on people. And our conclusion on that important question should also have implications for how we design our management models, whether we mainly believe in X or mainly believe in Y. So we have these two dimensions that we need to reflect on, and traditional management seems to have the assumption that the world is still a plannable, predictable place, and that most people is on the X side. Traditional management is something that's very rigid, detail is very annual, very rules-based, a lot of micromanagement, centralized command and control, a lot of secrecy, and a strong belief in sticks and carrots as ways to drive performance. If we disagree with those assumptions, this is not the place to be. We need to move up in that upper right-hand corner by addressing both leadership and management processes in a coherent, consistent way. On the leadership side, we need to be more values-based than rules-based. We need more autonomy. We need more transparency. And we need to build internal, intrinsic motivations through mastery, purpose, autonomy, and belonging, and not think that we can reach it by dangling bags of money in front of people's noses and tell them, do this and get that. But it's not enough to have these theory Y leadership visions if we have theory X management processes, which is the case in a lot of organizations. That creates poisonous gaps between what we preach and what we practice. So we also need to address management processes to make these words credible and to make our management model more VUCA robust. So here are things that we typically need to do in this dimension. Very often the traditional detailed annual budget has to go or be significantly revamped. It represents so much of that traditional management. We need to think more in relative terms and less in absolute terms when setting goals and ambitions. No football team would say that our most important goals or targets for next year is to score 39 goals, get 42 points. Those are budget goals. They don't think like that. They think in terms of league tables, how you perform versus peers. We need more dynamics into our processes, more business-driven, event-driven processes, less calendar-driven. And last but not least, evaluating performance can never be dumbed down to comparing two numbers and then conclude. We need a richer, broader performance language. And this, my friends, was a crash course in beyond budgeting. This is what it is about. addressing both leadership and management processes in a coherent, consistent way in order to become more adaptive, more human. Not necessarily as a goal in itself, but this is what it takes to compete in today's business and people realities. And here's beyond budgeting more in detail, the 12 principles. And as you can see, they address both leadership and management processes. And a key principle here is the coherence between the two. It doesn't help that we talk loud and warm on the left-hand side about how fantastic people we have in the organization. And we would be nothing without you. And we trust you so much. But not that much. Of course, we need detailed travel budgets. Just imagine what would happen if we loosened up. Hypocrisy. It doesn't help that we talk equally loud and warm on the left-hand side about we and us and together and team and everybody in the same boat. If everything we do on rewards is about individual bonus. Hypocrisy. We have been inspired by the beyond budgeting model in Equinor. We took our decision in 2005 to start on the journey. This is us in a nutshell. We used to be called Statoil. We are still have oil and gas activities, but we know that the future will be low carbon and we want to be part of it. And we have started on that journey. And I want to go back to the principles to share with you some concrete examples of what we did to make real change. And we have always tried to be a people-oriented, values-based company. We have something we call the Equinor book, our most important document. It talks about what we believe in, how we work. And this book talks a lot about values and people and leadership. I'm not saying we're perfect, but our problem was maybe that as we were growing, we were adding on more and more management processes that had a different message. So our journey has very much been about trying to change back again these management processes to better reflect our belief in people, while at the same time making these management processes more VUCA robust. So I'm going to work on the right-hand side here on the management processes to give you a few concrete examples. Rhythm. Our performance process, we don't call it the performance management process. Our performance process is much more business-driven, event-driven than calendar-driven. We have separated the three, like Beyond Budgeting recommends, the three purposes of a budget. Target, forecast, resource allocation, as reflected here in Principle 8 to 10, separated this into three different processes because these are different things. A target is an aspiration, it's what we want to happen. A forecast is an expectation. It's what we think will happen, whether we like what we see or not. And resource allocation is about optimizing scarce resources so that we can achieve what we want to happen. And by separating these three, we can improve each one in ways impossible when it's all bundled in this one budget number. We are setting much better targets today, with much better ownership out in the organization. We don't cascade targets. People translate corporate ambitions throughout the organization into their own teams. We have much better forecasting now than we have today. We have a simple, unbiased, non-political, lean forecasting process where we know we can trust the numbers. And resource allocation, we have a dynamic resource allocation. So no annual detailed budget, dynamic resource allocation, a lot of autonomy, a lot of empowerment. And more concretely, this means that take projects, investments. We don't have an annual investment budget where we sit in the autumn the year before and decide everything. This is exactly how much we shall invest, split on exactly on these projects, and then we hand out these bags of money to the organization. We don't do that. It's too early, it's too high up, it's too rigid. Instead, we have a principle which we call the bank is always open. The line can always forward a project for approval. How high up you need to go is regulated by a mandate structure to make sure that not everything is ending up upstairs. Whether you get a yes or no depends on two things. How good is your project? And second, can we afford it as things look today? And that information is coming out of this dynamic forecasting process where we all the time have access to relatively fresh data. Performance evaluation. Again, performance evaluation cannot be dumbed down to comparing two numbers and then conclude. We need a holistic performance evaluation. And for us, holistic means two things. First of all, the very first words in the Equinor book says, how we deliver is as important as what we deliver. And with how we deliver, we talk about the values in this book. And the weighting between the two in all consequences for your career, for your pay, is 50-50. The other thing we do is to, when we measure business results delivered, yes, we do some measurement. We use some KPIs, but we will never forget that the I in KPI stands for indicator, right? They are not necessarily telling the full truth. They are not called KPTs, key performance truth. They are called key performance indicators. So we need to go behind measurement, beyond measurement, pressure test what we have measured before we conclude. And we do that by looking at hindsight insights, headwind, tailwind, changes in assumptions, sustainability of delivered results before we conclude. So holistic performance evaluation is very important to the model. And finally, rewards. We do have some individual bonuses. I'm not a big fan, but it is important that we go through this holistic performance evaluation. But more importantly, we have a common bonus scheme. Everybody on board, driven by how is the company doing versus competition. Right? Thinking in relative terms, no absolute targets when it comes to financial performance. It's all relative. This was a very fast kind of journey through what Beyond Budgeting is about, what we have done. If you want the full story, it's in here, and you'll find it outside. And if you're even more interested, check out the Beyond Budgeting Roundtable, bbrt.org. It's a network of companies on the same journey. You're more than welcome to check us out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we will remember, Bjarte, that we must reward shared success against competition. So that's great. Now, we would like to listen to you, Christiane. Christiane, nearly in the same way that Bjarte introduced, as you know, she's working for Ottakringer, so she will explain how you pursue a mission and you create a charter, right?
So first of all, who's drunk an Ottakringer in Vienna? Okay, great. We have about 50% here. Please do try our beer. It's when you try it, you can feel the passion that is in this product, and you can feel the passion of our company. What you certainly have drunk is the first Lauer, which is also part of our company, and you have certainly drank that. And what it is all about our business is to go inside of you and make people happy, and make people feel the passion that we have for our product and the passion that we have for working together. Today, I would like to tell you a little bit the story that happened to us. It's a very personal story of a family business who gets aligned. We believe strongly in that bringing people together, drinking beer together, is a very special moment in our lives. Because when we drink beer together, then we unite in a certain way that many meetings cannot manage to do. And this is why we learn from these moments of drinking beer together to bring those into our company, maybe a little bit without beer, but maybe also with beer. And this is the journey that we had as a family business to get aligned. About 3 years ago, I studied at INSEAD. I did a change management course, which lasts 2 years. And funnily enough, at module 3, the theme was about family business. There were interesting questions flying into my computer that asked the following things. Family members are good listeners. Every family member had to rate on a scale of 1 to 5 if this was true or not. We asked all our family shareholders to answer these questionnaires. Family members express affection to each other. Family members talk about important issues with each other. When family members ask questions of each other, we get honest answers. Family members calmly discuss problems with each other. You can probably think or estimate what happened. Well, the family was pretty critical about our communication, and we rated it between low and moderate, meaning that family members have certain concerns about the way they communicate with each other. So this was an alarm sign for me as a chairwoman of the board to say, hey guys, we need to wake up. We need to work on our communication. we hired a lady from INSEAD, a professor, and that was the lucky thing, because if I would have said to my family, let's take a consultant, we probably would have shot them down. So I said, we need a professor who will tell us how other family members do things. And we need a professor with English language, because English language makes immediately the third generation stronger than the second generation, who is not so capable of speaking English. And so therefore, there's more equality within the family. So that's what we did. And we created together, when the professor came, she told us, well, families do family charters together. They work on why they are in business. They work on how they are in business together. And this is what we said. Okay, we want to do this. We want to get engaged in this. And so is what we did. And first of all, what we did is we talked about values. Why are we here? What is really the purpose and the values and the things that drive us to do this business? And first of all, what the values were, that we think very much that the human is in the center of things in our company. One other very important value is obviously, you probably can think about it, is humor. Humor is so important in our business. We want to have fun. We want to drink beer together. We want to laugh together. And thirdly, of course, the entrepreneurial spirit that we want to transcend to every of our employees. So we worked on values, and that was a very important work, because what it did is it aligned the whole family together. Beliefs divide, values unite. And this is what happened. It really deeply changed the communication level of our family. And it was really pretty interesting to see that the older generation thought, wow, this is actually not so bad to listen to the younger generation. They are actually aligned with us. They have the same thinking. We have actually transcended and put down to them our thoughts and our thinkings. Secondly, we worked on vision, on mission, and on employment policy. And we are still working on governance, on strategy, and investment policy. And I think all of this would not have been possible would we not have used a technique within our family that is called fair process. Fair process is a way of communication that actually makes every family member be able to address what they think and what they have in mind, without getting defensive, without saying, oh no, I don't believe in this, without judging, without any form of judgment. And this was probably the most important moment in our transformation, is that hearing everybody's voice transformed the entire perspective of how we work together. And after once we heard everybody's opinion, we collected the data, we collected the ideas, went back into smaller groups, worked our smaller groups, had a presentation, then back to the big group, and said, okay, the big group now decide, is it okay or is it not okay? And this is what really made a big, huge difference in the way of communication. I believe strongly that this way of communicating has transformed our organization. And recently, we have redone the assessment with the family. And see, it was very interesting. We rated ourselves top level this time. And so it makes me very proud to see that a family can align like this. And what it does, it gives not only to the family a strong togetherness to continue from generation to generation, but it also, and this is more important, reflects into the organization. And you know, now we have a cousin collaboration, and this cousin siblings collaboration generation will have an effect on the way we work in management and in our future together. And what it will do is it will foster trust, it will foster fun, and it will foster engagement of all the stakeholders. Thank you.
Just a second, please. Just wait.
You still here?
I have two additional questions. Thank you for the timing, Christiane.
Yeah. I made up some time here.
So you have time. Now, my very first question, you were talking of alignment, but how many people are concerned when you say the family council, when you make the charter? 1, 2, 3, 10? How many people?
Oh, yeah. So our second generation has 4 people, and the total of the second and the third generation is 15 people.
How many?
15.
Oh my God. So you don't fight? Never?
Not right now. But I think it's we have learned how to listen to each other, and that's,
Okay.
I think, makes a big difference.
And the second question, your family name is not Ottakringer, but I'm sure that everybody knows that you are from the family. So you studied at INSEAD, but at the very beginning, did you come from the bottom or from the top? Did you make something special that makes you proud and admired by your employees?
That's a long story, because I'm an activist in our company, and I was actually I had a sausage stand, and I was selling beer on my sausage stand. That was my history. I was an entrepreneur before I came into our business, and that's the way the people got to know me, that I was actually doing really good business inside of Vienna, and it made me a bit of a rebel within my family, and yeah. And here I am, trying to be the activist now in our own system.
And when you entered the company, what was the first job? Did you work in a brewery or something?
The very first job...
Or the second one, I mean, did you...
My very first job was that my father actually asked me to come and help. No, it wasn't like this. I told my father, listen, you have a disaster in your marketing department. I can come and I can help you out. And he said, yes, but you disappear after 2 months, please, because I don't want to see a family member, working our business. It's too much hassle. So that was my beginning, and I started to be so interested in the matter that I was really getting into the things. And I left after 2 months, but then he asked me to come back.
And did you put hands-on, I mean, work in a brewery or something?
Yes, I worked 17 years, I managed the brewery. What we did is we opened a brewery to the public. We have now 300,000 guests coming into the brewery and partying in the brewery. So we are part of the city life, doing concerts, doing music events, doing big young generation people that have little businesses that sell their things there, and so on and so forth, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Christiane. And now Peter will focus on the added complexities faced by the boards of family firms and firms with shareholder control boards. Okay, Peter, so that's your turn. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nearly 400 years ago now, Pascal observed that if we read too fast or if we read too slow, we understand absolutely nothing. And that's the context that I want to put on the table and use as a platform for what I've got to share with you now. So this is the board's perspective. By way of background, I'm a company director. I also advise boards, and it's the centre of my research interests as well, internationally. So we're going to first start off with 2 vignettes. What it's like to have almost no skin in the game, the corporate boards. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll come to the other side, and I'll tell you a story about a company that's got almost too much skin in the game, almost too much, and how that compromises their decision making. And then I'll try and chart a pathway, a little bit like Goldilocks. Not too hot, not too cold. So let's go. So this is the reality, and this reality we know, we've heard about it, and everything's changing, almost nothing's guaranteed. Shareholders of our companies, doesn't matter whether they're family firms or big publicly listed firms, shareholders have expectations, and they make mistakes. And when companies make mistakes, the regulators get involved and they set up rules. And we in New Zealand, we have health and safety rules just like here. And we have to answer to regulators, and we have all of these rules. And it seems that every time we make a really big mistake in a company, there's an investigation and there's more rules. And what does that do for our board of directors? It helps us focus more on rules. The intention is to help us focus on performance. But it actually, counterintuitively, it helps us, forces us to focus on what it shouldn't. Thankfully, lots of people with big brains are taking the initiative and producing best practice guidance. And best practice says if you do this, if you do this, if you do this, then good stuff will happen. Things like diversity on boards of various forms, or separating the role of the chair and the chief executive, or having boards of this size, or whatever these things are. But now think of some companies. Think of Volkswagen, FIFA, Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, Wells Fargo, Carillion in the UK, various firms that I won't name in New Zealand and Australia. All of these firms were compliant with best practice, and they all failed or had big missteps, which makes you think that best practice might not be best. It's kind of funny, isn't it? So hold that thought, because what it does is it confuses directors. And so with all of these different suggestions, what I find when I'm in boardrooms, when I'm talking with directors, is they become quite confused about their job. They don't understand their role very well, they get confused about what corporate governance is, and they retreat into their shell because the protection of personal reputation and professional reputation becomes the primary driver for their behaviour. So that's what happens at that end of the spectrum. At the other end of the spectrum, let me tell you about Riverlock. Jim Brown is 95 years old. I know that because I lit the candle on his birthday cake at the last board meeting on the 14th of November. His birthday's on the 15th of November. In 1945, he became a dairy farmer, milking cows. In 1965, he purchased his first farm with 100 cows. Today, that business has 4,600 livestock, 3,000 milking cows. They have nearly 70 hectares of horticulture. They have interests in land all over the place and other activities as well. Approximately €150 million corporation. Family business. But they regularly get mixed up between what's family business and what's company business. The old man, he's delightful, uses the company as a bank. So when he needs a new car, or when he thinks he needs a new car, he just goes into the company bank account and takes out some money so that he can buy his car. And when you ask him about it, he says, "Oh, it's all right, it's my money anyway," and he's right. But he's got so much skin in the game, and the only job he's really had is this company and his boys. And the boys are now between 56 and 64 years old. It's all the same. So when you start talking to them about governance and talking to them about decision making, they talk to you about the dinner table and how they sit around and do these things. And I'm their first outside director ever. I'm not going to tell you the answer to the question, but I'm just drawing these two parallels. This is the role of the board of directors. It is not what the big company boards think it is, which is protecting reputation or overseeing management. Those are parts of it, but this is the role of the board of directors. Almost any statute in the world will tell you this. It's to preserve and ensure the performance of the organisation into the future. And if company boards are going to do that well, they need to make smart decisions in a complex world. And so effectiveness is like these footprints on the sand. It's not permanent. We need to work out where we're going. We need to work out how we're going to get there. And importantly for company boards, we need to understand the business. That's easy for a family business, much harder for a corporate business. Harvard Business Review, about 3 years ago, Barton and Wiseman's research identified that 16%, 16% of directors understand the business of the business. And so 5 out of 6 do not, which makes it really interesting upon what they're basing their decisions in the company boardroom. So let's quickly look at what we need in place. Imagine if on the 28th of August 1963, this man had have said, "I have a plan." It would have been a footnote in history. But he said, what? "I have a dream." And why did he say that? He knew that people get behind causes, they don't get behind things. And those causes need to be underpinned by values, which drive our decision making, and they drive our behaviours. And all of this needs to be lined up, and all of this needs to be agreed. But it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. More is needed. And it's like a yacht, really, a boardroom. And in my research, there's really only 3 things that matter for a board to be effective and to move back from those more extreme positions that I've told you about. We need 3 things. 1, we need all of the directors to be capable. So we need what they bring is important. Their technical expertise, like the various sailor positions, their knowledge, their sector knowledge, these guys about sailing, Riverlock about farming, these things. Sector knowledge, technical expertise. That's what we bring individually. And then when we come inside the boardroom, we can look at people like Bob Garrett and Bob Tricker and Morten Huus from Germany and others, and we realise it's collectively about what we do. So setting strategy, setting policy, monitoring management, providing an account, these things, working with management. And then lastly, the behaviour standards. This is what matters. And I'd like to show you the 5 key behaviour standards. And this is the first one. Strategic competence. Do our directors understand what they're there for? Are they intelligent? Do they have this cognition? Have they got these skills and expertise, and do they apply them? The second, are they engaged? Do they turn up to the meeting prepared? Or do they open their envelopes? It's harder with an iPad now with board software to tell that they haven't prepared. But are they there ready to go? Third one, sense of purpose. Do they know why they're there? Have they got that motivation and desire, importantly, to work together? Collective efficacy is about that ability to make decisions together. Andrew Kakabatsi at Henley did some research a couple of years ago which identified that 33% of boards have got the cognition, cohesion and engagement to make good decisions. 2/3 do not. Scary, scary stuff. And then the last one is constructive control. Does the board operate like a coach or punitively like a policeman, which is what most of our governance theory talks about? All of these things need to be working harmoniously together in the boardroom if the board is going to have any chance of influencing performance. If anyone is missing, the board becomes a cost centre. It's about that black and white. But in the end, it's actually quite straightforward. If our economies are to grow, if our societies are to prosper, we need strong companies and we need boards that are engaged well. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you to everybody. We have a few minutes before lunchtime, so I suggest that we have no Slido, we have people inside, so I would like some questions from you, please. Or if not, I have, great. Please, second row. No, we give you a mic.
Thank you. So to Denise, just some questions to your principles, because is there a ranking that you have put on that one? Because I've seen 1 to 25, and only 14 or 15 was trust, which would concern me, so I would like to understand that better.
Yeah, okay, so excellent question, because those long-lasting firms, the successful long-lasting firms, they do all 25 to, as you've seen in the model, each of them are fully. So if you take one as from 1% to 100%, for each of them, they have that scale. And they get to the 100%. The big challenge for them is going to be, how do we stay at that 100% and don't lose what we have? But the reason why the model is really interesting is that with it, you can compare if you're a first generation or if you're a 10-year company, but if you want to go long-term and you want to be successful over the long term, you can measure yourself as where you are today. and you can have discussions in the families as where you are, and what are the points that are your strong points that you just need to protect, and what are the ones that are the weak points that you need to work on. Trust is extremely important, in particular in families when you have the trust needs to come from the shareholders who are outside the business versus the ones who manage the business. So ethics, values, and a strong corporate culture are going to help in there. What are the principles we set behind that? How much do we... It's those loose organizations where we don't just talk together when we are in the boardroom, or we don't just talk together when we have a management meeting, but when there is something important, how do we sit down together to talk about that, because it is important. We build trust because we are able to address the tough questions, the really difficult questions, and those companies can. They have that capacity. They never shy away from their responsibilities. No matter how tough the question is, they will go there and they will address it. And it is painful and it is difficult sometimes. But you don't build trust if you don't address the difficult questions. You don't build trust if you don't sometimes remove people who are not competent from the business. You don't build trust if you are not transparent and open. And without trust, there is no... it's certain that you will not go long term. Yeah.
Thank you. But Bjarte, you will make
If I quickly could add, when it comes to trust, don't forget that trust is free. Control is not. Control is very expensive.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Another question from the room, please. Madam.
Hi. There was a great example that was given about fair processes. Person talked about rules of engagement in terms of getting the communication correct among the family members. And I wanted to know what those steps were for this fair process. You mentioned fair process, but I don't know what that is, because that is something not just family businesses have a problem, but all businesses have a problem. So if you've got that, I'd like to hear it.
Christiane.
Yes, fair process is something taught at INSEAD. You can Google it to have the full details, but basically what it is that you hear every voice in the group. And I think that's really empowering for everyone, because you don't have one voice is more important than the other. You hear all the voices. That's what you do first. And without judgment and without response, you just hear everyone's voice. You collect everyone's thinking. And then you take out of the group a mostly there's, like, for example, about values. Yeah, we asked everyone, how do you feel about values? Everybody puts down their thoughts, their thinking, their ideas to that. And then what they do is a small group crystallized out of the larger group and said, well, we want to continue working on values specifically. Who wants to join? And so there was a group of 3 people that actually were free and wanted to work on that and continue to work on that. And then they went back with their results. They went back with everything that they collected. They went back into the big group and said, here is what we have to offer. How does everyone feel about it? And funnily enough, everybody feels good about it. And maybe someone says, well, this is maybe not so perfect. And then from that point on, we finalize it. It takes more time, a lot more time, but it is extremely efficient because everybody is completely aligned and everybody supports the whole idea afterwards. And then you go into your company and you say, this is what we worked on as a family.
Thank you. Thank you. So that's 12:30, so it's lunchtime. So I suggest we thank you very much, our speakers, and you can continue the discussion in the room afterward. Thank you.
Thank you.